Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which sees the opening of Creed 3 and also a new film from Guy Ritchie called Operation Fortune, which I believe was also pulled up from its initial release. Let's just say I've been a pretty big fan of Guy Ritchie films, especially over the last few years. He's definitely made some duds like Aladdin, but he's also made some really good ones like The Gentleman and Wrath of Man. But today we're going to talk mostly about Creed 3's numbers because, oh boy, the box office media is once again running with the same narrative like they did for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which is that the third installment of the Creed franchise is projected to have a title record debut. But guess what? So did Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and then it ended up having a record loss from week 1 to week 2, and it's looking like that film has at least the potential to end up losing money when all is said and done. Could the same be said of Creed 3? Personally, I think that it probably could, because the Creed films already haven't been the biggest moneymakers in the world, and when you have a Creed film that is set within the Rocky universe without Rocky in the film at all, kind of makes you wonder, okay, who is actually going to go see this film, and is it going to be enough going forward? Before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, light that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and smash the rumble button as well. And also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification on that way you know every time a video or live stream goes live on the channel. And yes, my voice is still trash. Again, thank you all very much for your patience having to cancel this past week's live stream. But when you have post-nasal drip mixed with teaching, and so therefore talking for a living, it is just usually not a good combination. Definitely need to hit some tea at some point. Probably won't be able to do that until the weekend just because things have been so crazy. And you can probably hear the dogs behind me as well. But as it says from Deadline, Creed 3 eyeing franchise title 3-day record. I know, River. She's like, wait, they're running with the same nonsense again? Didn't they do the same thing with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and then that film ended up having a 70% drop from week 1 to week 2? Yes, that's exactly what they are doing here. It says, the winter box office continues to have some breadth as MGM's Creed 3, the feature directorial debut of Michael B. Jordan, eyes a potential franchise high opening for the Rocky spinoff about Apollo Creed's son with $38 to $40 million, bow at 4,000 plus screens. Previous Creed picks played during the Thanksgiving frame in 2015 and 2018 respectively to $29 million and $35.5 million off an A cinema score. Oh yes, that's right. Mentioning the cinema scores again, that means I get triggered because cinema score is complete trash. They don't release any actual data other than the letter grade itself, and there's a lot of questions about where do they get those numbers from, what cities do they get those numbers from, because that ultimately will impact the score of any film that they ever release. Already, Creed 3 is 90% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Oh, that's right, Rotten Tomatoes critics. Yes, that means that 90% of them hit the fresh button. Does not mean that 90% of them thought the film was really, really good, which is higher than Creed 2's 83%, which is already kind of a red flag about Rotten Tomatoes and its legitimacy, because Creed 2 was not very good at all. The first Creed was actually pretty great. It had Rocky. It was very much in a lot of ways, a traditional Rocky film with Rocky passing the mantle on to someone new, right? The son of Apollo Creed, which was a very interesting story and interesting dynamic. Michael B. Jordan is a very talented actor too, so that's why I really actually enjoy that first film a lot. And I was expecting a lot from Creed 2, as that film also still had Rocky Balboa in it, but Rocky kind of, again, took a back seat in the story, and obviously it's to try to make room for Creed, but because of that, it meant that his character got a little bit more attention, and it really felt like they didn't know what they were doing with the story. They didn't know where they wanted to go with the character, and so the story ended up just falling flat on its face. But as you can see here, Creed 3 is indeed still projected to do pretty well. What's also interesting is that we did indeed get a box office, a budget mention here. $75 million is the production budget for this film, and that will become relevant when we talk about the possible, the most likely break-even point for this film going forward. But $38 to $40 million opening weekend is what they are projecting. Now, just want to put this out there that Box Office Pro also put out their projections, and they're putting out $43 million. Now, keep in mind that Box Office Pro also had a higher end in mind for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and we all know where Ant-Man and the Wasp ended up coming out. Yes, it was a franchise record opening, but then it also had one of the worst drop-offs ever. And in fact, the projections from Box Office Pro were about 6% off from that. They were projecting a 64% drop, and the reality was actually a 70% drop. And so just keep that in mind. Take that number with a grain of salt, but just know that right now they are projecting in the industry somewhere between $38 and $43 million by this opening weekend. And could it happen? I mean, I think it's possible. Obviously, they are even mentioning here in this article that this film is going to play very, very well and is playing very, very well with black audiences, as it says there, especially younger skewing audiences. Creed 2 pulled in 66% under 35 and a diverse range of 38% Caucasian, 29% African-American, which I will honestly say that is actually kind of surprising to me. I would have expected African-American support to be a little bit higher than the Caucasian support. But again, that was when you did have a film that featured Rocky Balboa. So maybe that is the reason why. Maybe this film will actually have that flip-flop and skew. But because of that, that might mean that you have less numbers overall. And so that's the reason why, yeah, you might have the overall biggest opening of the Creed franchise, but that does not necessarily mean that the film is going to be successful going forward. Also, especially when you remember that they are not adjusting for inflation, because that is just something that they tend to do, right? The first Creed film, adjusted for inflation, again, this is using the numbers, and just keep in mind, the numbers is using, inflation numbers. Usually it's a pretty delayed number, trying to basically give, the fairest assessment of what the value of the films released in 2015, 2018 would have been in today's dollars. But really it's using like maybe second or third quarter numbers from 2022 instead of the most recent ones, right? If you were to actually go to the CPI calculator, this is the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, you would actually see very clearly, right, that the value of the dollar in 2015 was expected to be around $1.20. And if you were to, again, do the math for yourself, you would realize that that number then is going to make this number a bit higher. And then the same could also be said for this number here. Regardless of that, though, $32 million and $35 million, respectively, for Creed 1 and Creed 2 were the opening weekends for those films. Those films also cost a lot less, $40 million versus $50 million. Both films ended up doing okay as far as just general box office is concerned. They were able to make their money back, right? $188 million for the first Creed, $214 million for the second Creed. Notice, though, that the domestic numbers actually dropped for the second Creed film, where their international numbers gained. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not there is any increase or decrease between those two numbers for this third film, because again, not having Rocky Balboa, I think, is going to ultimately be a much bigger impact on this film going forward, because even if they are able to get their number, and again, right now the projections are between $38 and $40 million, and based off of the numbers as they had done, you can see that means it's within the range to fall probably close to that of the original films. Even if it does go above Creed 2, though, that does not mean automatically success. Again, Ant-Man and the Wasp learned that lesson very, very hard when it had a massive opening weekend comparatively, but then also had a massive drop-off and could end up being the lowest grossing film of the Ant-Man franchise. Could we see the same thing for Creed 3? I think it's absolutely possible at this point. I think that we can recognize that Creed is not a huge international property, right? Even with the decrease in domestic and increase international, you can still see that the domestic is clearly a lot stronger for both Creed films. Expect to see the same thing for this upcoming movie as well. And so, again, we're looking at these numbers, and I will be tracking to see how this film is doing comparatively to those original, those last two Creed films. And yeah, I honestly would not be surprised, because Creed 2 was not good. So I think they're probably going to have lost audience from this one alone, because it just wasn't very good. And I think that Creed 3 ultimately as well, right? If you're looking at the critic scores, and we obviously haven't gotten any of the audience scores yet, but based off of the marketing for the film too, I just can't really see this film doing well with Rocky fans, right? The previous films at the very least had some Rocky fans holding over, right? There were some who said, yeah, but the story's not focused on Rocky, and so therefore it's not for me. And so you had others like me who were like, oh, this is part of the Rocky franchise, this is great. Having Rocky not in the picture for this movie is already kind of, putting me off from really even wanting to see it. But obviously, I do want to be able to get back to y'all about whether the film is any good or not, if it tries to push any identity politics, especially since the film does feature some actors in it that obviously try to push for those agendas, both in this and other films in, obviously in the future. But it does also feature a performance here from an actor who has actually been in one of the worst drop-offs in cinema history, at least in MCU history, with Jonathan Majors playing the key bad guy in the film, who is going to end up fighting Michael B. Jordan's character here. And so those are the numbers as they currently stand. Talking a little bit about the break-even point, the film needs to make $187.5 million to break even based off of typical standards. So it's $75 million budget, 2.5 times that budget, which is the typical break even point, 187.5 million break even. And so is that possible? Yes. But when you start to recognize and look at these numbers, and especially compare the numbers that were existing for those first two Creed films, 187.5, that falls within that margin of error, basically saying that you could potentially see Creed 3 end up being a box office flop. So if it has the largest opening weekend of its franchise, but then it also has a massive 60% plus drop off, and it just does not retain any of its audience, and it has a very small international footprint, which films like this seem to have much smaller international footprints these days than in previous years, this could end up spelling a lot of trouble for the film moving forward. But also, I did want to mention a little bit about some of the other films, right? So you do have some of the projections, again, from Box Office Pro. Take it with a grain of salt. Ant-Man and the Wasp projected to drop another 56%. That's after already a 70% drop. So yeah, things are not looking good for this movie at all. let's just say the potential for this film to be a flop is definitely on the table. You also have a debut from a new Crunchyroll film, another Demon Slayer film to the Swordsmith Village with a $10.8 million debut. So that's pretty strong for that. A Cocaine Bear, 56% drop in its second weekend of release. So not the best of drops in the world percentage-wise for a film like that. But from what I've heard, the very mixed reviews I've heard of the film, it doesn't surprise me. But again, I think that it probably hit its break-even point by the end of the weekend. Jesus Revolution also doing pretty well, 9.4 million. One that I'm looking forward to, unfortunately, because of Creed 3, there are no good showtimes for this movie, and so I probably won't be able to see this film tonight. In fact, if any review gets on the channel tonight, if I'm able to do so with my voice, it would be for Creed 3. But the only reason why I wouldn't be able to see this film is because it's getting all the 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. shows, which are terrible for me as a teacher and also as someone who is a parent as well. So I'll be taking care of my son during the time in which the first showing is going. And so I probably won't be able to see this until a little bit later. So expect either a review for Creed 3 or Cocaine Bear this evening, because those are basically the only two films that I could probably make work. But this film, expected to open to $4 million, not the greatest opening in the world. But these films probably don't cost nearly as much with Guy Ritchie behind the helm. Avatar: Way of Water hanging around, Bush Saput's hanging around, Magic Mike's Last Dance, still dying. And then 80 for Brady also still dying as well. So those are the numbers as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts about this and any of the films that I talked about? Let me know in the comment section down below. If also, do you think Creed 3 is going to be the biggest opening of the franchise, but then also one of the worst drop-offs of the franchise and probably the lowest grossing? I think that's absolutely a possibility. It all depends on whether the film is actually good or not. We all know early critic reviews mean nothing in today's world. It's all about that audience reaction. It's all about what our actual audience is saying about the film. And when you have someone like Tessa Thompson in the film, that's already going to push a lot of people away because of some of the crazy things that she has said. And so I think ultimately it's going to come down to the film itself and the quality of the film. Hey, I hope Michael B. Jordan does a great job directing, because I think he is a very talented actor, but we will have to wait and see. Let me know your thoughts about this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, light up the fire button, honestly, smash the rumble button as well. Hope that you are continuing to have a blessed Lenten season. If anyone's wondering why I have the purple lights on, it is for this season of Lent. So we are in the first week of Lent, so I hope that you are still having a wonderful Lenten season. And remember, great time for prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And again, I'm praying for all of you and hope that you pray for me as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.
And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Patreon, locals, and Subscribestar members who are at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above, starting off with Father Luca Illick, Garrett Searles, Chris from the 80s, who you can check out over on YouTube by the same name, Hymir Irie Hymason, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Hat Reviews, you can check out at his YouTube channel by the same name as well, Laura, the Modern Major General story, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, which goes by the same name on YouTube. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on Patreon. And also for my Subscribestar peeps, we got Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name. Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And a special shout out to the R. And also, lastly, to my locals members, starting off with Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer Robert Barnes. Thank you all very much for supporting me for the month of February. You guys are all fantastic. If you want your name shouted out, access to exclusive podcasts, and exclusive giveaways, check out the top link in the video description below. Anyway, you guys are all great. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. And as always, God bless.